Most people picture the Hells Angels as free men who answer to no one. The truth is almost the opposite. The club runs on strict written rules, and its code can demand your motorcycle, your silence, and your loyalty above everything else. Break it, and the punishment can be a beating from your own brothers. These are 12 of the most brutal rules the Hells Angels enforce, and what happens to the men who break them. Rule 1. You ride a Harley Davidson, and it stays running. The first thing the Hells Angels demand of a member is not his loyalty or his silence, but his machine. The club was founded in 1948 in Fontana, California, and everything it became was arranged around a single piece of American engineering. The Harley Davidson is not simply what members happen to ride. It is the object the club's entire identity is constructed on, and nearly 80 years after Fontana, the requirement is still written policy. A Hells Angel owns a Harley, and the rule has never been framed as a tradition a member can quietly step around, because a Hells Angel on a foreign motorcycle is a contradiction of the patch on his own back, and the club does not tolerate contradictions in anything it wears or rides. But ownership alone is not enough, and this is the part of the rule that almost nobody outside the club ever hears. A member whose motorcycle sits broken for more than 30 days without an acceptable explanation faces fines, which means a man can be punished not for wrecking or for riding badly, but for the simple fact of a silent garage. Inside the life. That means a member waiting through winter for a transmission part he cannot afford, watching a clock run against him with every day the bike stays down, because the club has decided that a dead motorcycle says something about its owner. An angel who cannot ride cannot make runs or hold his place in the pack, and if the engine has stopped, then as far as the club is concerned, so has the member. The requirement bends in only one place. The organization has spread past 467 charters around the world, and some European chapters have quietly relaxed the Harley rule because keeping American V-twins alive overseas is slow and expensive. But in North America, it has never loosened at all. The pack stays uniform because the uniformity itself is the message, and a formation of identical machines rolling into a town announces a single organization rather than a collection of riders. Even the miles are compulsory. Members ride roughly 12,000 miles together every year, a number built out of runs and funerals, and everything else the patch obligates a man to attend, which means the 30-day rule is not really about the motorcycle at all. It is an attendance rule wearing a mechanic's clothes, because a man who cannot keep a V-twin alive cannot be trusted to hold formation at highway speed with 50 brothers around him, and a man who cannot ride at all is simply absent. Rule 2. You attend church every week, or you pay. Every charter of the Hells Angels holds a mandatory weekly meeting, and inside the club that meeting has a name. They call it church. The name is only half a joke, because the club treats attendance with total seriousness, and missing church without an excuse costs money, tracked and collected like everything else a member owes. The world knows the numbers because the club's own rule book once escaped it, lost by a member on the ride home from a California charter meeting and printed by the press. And the figures inside told the story of a disciplined organization hiding behind an outlaw reputation. A missed meeting cost $2 in that era. A new member paid a $15 initiation fee, roughly $150 in modern money. And none of the numbers have stayed small, because the fine for meeting violations now runs to $100 or more. The Outlaws have a treasurer, and the treasurer keeps score. Church is also where the rest of this list gets administered, because the votes on prospects are cast in that room and the fines for every violation are levied in it, which makes the weekly meeting the engine of the entire code rather than one obligation among many. None of that structure appeared by accident. Sonny Barger bound the scattered California charters together under shared written bylaws when the club was young, and the weekly meeting became the glue of that construction, the mechanism that lets one club hold discipline across hundreds of charters, while rival organizations tear themselves apart. The structure carried the Hells Angels across America and around the world, and it still runs, every single week, in every charter the club maintains, from California to Auckland. with the same fines waiting in every language. So forget the image of the outlaw answering to no one, because the reality is the opposite. Hell's Angels run their week like a disciplined organization that demands more structure from a member than most jobs ever will, claiming his weeknights along with his entire riding season, and billing him whenever he fails to appear. The obligation never pauses for the rest of a man's life, and the meetings where his attendance is tallied are the same rooms where the club votes on the fates of men who want what he has. But before the club can claim any of a man's time, the man has to get in. And getting in is a rule system of its own, one designed to break him first. Rule 3. Nobody joins until every single member says yes. There is no application form for the Hell's Angels, and there is no interview, because the club has built something far more demanding than either. A man who wants the patch enters a process that takes years, and he enters it at the very bottom as what the Angels call a hang-around. A stranger permitted to exist near the club and nothing more. He shows up and he is watched, and if the members decide he is worth the trouble, he moves up to associate and eventually to prospect. And it is there, wearing a partial patch that marks him as property rather than brother, that the real examination begins. A prospect belongs to the charter in every practical sense. He guards the bikes while the members drink. He drives through the night when someone needs moving, and he does it all without a vote or a voice, and without any promise that the years he is spending will ever amount to anything. The club owes him nothing, and that is the point. Because the Hell's Angels are not recruiting employees, they are selecting family, and the standard for family is written into the mechanics of the final step. When a prospect's time comes, his fate goes to a vote of the full charter, and the mechanics of that vote are brutal. It has to be unanimous. Not a majority, and not an overwhelming consensus, but every single member in the room saying yes, which means that one man with one doubt can erase years of a prospect's life in a single evening. A member who has watched the prospect for all that time and simply never warmed to him holds the same veto as the charter president, and the prospect will likely never learn whose hand went the wrong way. That rule builds something no rival organization has ever matched. Every full member of the Hell's Angels, anywhere on Earth, is a man that an entire room agreed on, which means the club has no marginal members and no reluctant admissions. The unanimity requirement functions as a filter that makes betrayal structurally rare, because every man wearing the patch has been vouched for by everyone standing next to him. Law enforcement agencies have spent decades trying to plant people inside the club precisely because the front door is so nearly impossible to walk through. But the vote is only the final gate, and the years before it are their own kind of trial. Because while a prospect serves, the members are not merely watching how hard he works. They are provoking him, deliberately and constantly, to answer the one question the vote depends on. What does this man do when he is pushed? Rule 4. A prospect takes the abuse and never strikes back. Of all the rules the Hell's Angels have ever committed to, this one is among the few the club has confirmed in its own words. When the Toronto Star examined the organization's membership practices, the answer that came back was unambiguous. A prospect cannot retaliate against the hazing he receives under any circumstances, and the club is open about why, because it does not regard the abuse as cruelty for its own sake. It regards the abuse as an instrument, a way of measuring what a man is made of before the club ties its name to him forever. A prospect who accepts that patch is agreeing to a bargain with no ceiling on it. For months, and often years, full members can humiliate him in front of the room and work him past exhaustion, manufacturing provocations designed to reach the exact nerve that would make an ordinary man swing. And through all of it, his only acceptable response is to absorb it and continue. The moment he strikes back, his candidacy is finished. Years of service can end over one flash of temper, and the club considers that outcome not a loss but a success, because the test has done precisely what it was built to do. The logic underneath is colder than the hazing itself. The Hell's Angels are an organization whose survival depends on discipline under pressure, on men who can stand in front of police interrogators and rival clubs without breaking. And a man who cannot control himself in a clubhouse is a man who will fail the club somewhere far more dangerous. His anger is not the problem. His obedience is the question. And the club has learned that the only reliable way to measure obedience is to make disobedience as tempting as possible. There is a second function too, one that reveals how carefully the system fits together. The rule teaches a prospect, before he ever holds a vote, that the hierarchy is absolute, and that his own pride ranks below the club's judgment in every situation without exception. By the time a man reaches that unanimous vote, he has already spent years proving that he will place the organization above his own instincts, which is exactly what the angels demand of full members for the rest of their lives. A club can screen for temperament with time and patience, and the angels have plenty of both. But there is one kind of man that no amount of testing can ever make acceptable, and the rule that keeps him out is the hardest line the club has ever drawn. Rule 5. No cops, no ex-cops, not even a man who once applied. Somewhere in the Hells Angels' written requirements sits a line that reveals more about the club's fears than anything else it has ever put on paper. Membership is closed to anyone who has worked in law enforcement, and the ban does not stop at police officers because it extends to prison guards and even to men who merely applied for those jobs and were never hired. The line reaches further than any other membership requirement in the club. A man can spend years as a flawless prospect, and if it surfaces that he once filled out an application to a police academy at 19, the door closes forever because the club has decided that the instinct to wear a badge is a permanent condition rather than a phase. The paranoia behind that line is earned, and no story proved it better than the one that began in Arizona in the early 2000s. As Federal Agent Jay Dobbins, working for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, spent nearly 2 years inside the club's orbit under a false name, posing as a gun-running debt collector while an investigation called Operation Black Biscuit built cases around him. Dobbins did what the rule exists to prevent. He moved through the layers designed to filter men exactly like him and climbed close enough to full membership that the club was preparing to hand its patch to a serving federal agent. When the operation surfaced in 2003 and the arrests began, the Hells Angels learned that the wall they had spent decades building had very nearly been walked through. But here is what mattered about that breach. It was famous precisely because it was rare. The prosecutions that followed Black Biscuit grew complicated and many of the most serious charges eroded, while the club responded the way it always responds to a wound, by hardening the rule that had failed. Vetting grew longer and background scrutiny grew deeper, and the club that had already been nearly impossible to enter became more closed than ever. The rule also carries a quieter, harsher edge for men already inside, because contact with police in any cooperative form is treated as contamination. A member does not call the police and does not assist them even as a victim, since a clubhouse burglary is club business and will be handled as club business. The badge is not merely an enemy uniform. It is the one allegiance the club believes no man can ever fully take off, and the Angels refuse to gamble the patch on the possibility that they are wrong. And that patch, as the next rule makes clear, is worth more to the club than the men who wear it. Rule 6. The patch belongs to the club, and it always comes back. Every Hells Angel wears the same insignia across his back, a 3-piece patch. And the most important thing to understand about it is that the man wearing it does not own it. The top rocker arches the words, Hells Angels, above the center patch, the Death Head, while the bottom rocker beneath it names the charter's territory, and beside the skull sits the small square MC patch that separates a motorcycle club from a riding association. Together, the pieces are the colors, and every element of the arrangement is rationed by rank. A hangaround wears nothing at all, while a prospect rides with only the bottom rocker and the MC patch, the top rocker and the Death Head withheld, until the day he patches in, which means a man's exact standing can be read off his back from across a parking lot. And a man who wears any piece he has not earned is inviting a response that everyone in the biker world understands in advance. The club treats the loss of a patch as a dishonor with consequences attached, and it has built that principle into a full system of property law. The colors are issued, not given. A member carries them the way a soldier carries a flag, and when his time in the club ends, however it ends, the full patch goes home to the organization. If a member leaves on good terms, retired after years of service with his obligations settled, the separation follows a protocol, and the patch is surrendered back to the charter. But if a man goes out in bad standing, the process turns into an erasure. The club does not stop at taking back the vest. A man out in bad standing is expected to remove every trace of the organization from his life, and that includes the club tattoos on his own skin, which are to be covered over or taken off entirely, with the date of his departure sometimes inked beside what remains as a permanent notice to anyone who checks. What makes the system remarkable is how far the club will go to defend the image in the straight world. The Hells Angels registered the death head as a trademark and enforce it through the courts like any corporation guarding a brand, filing suit against fashion houses and retailers that borrow the design, including a case against famous British luxury fashion brand Alexander McQueen and the stores that carried its skull ring designs, because the patch is only worth protecting if the world never learns what happens behind it, and keeping the world ignorant is itself a written rule. Rule 7. You never talk about another member to anyone. In 1965, a young journalist named Hunter S. Thompson began writing with the Hells Angels, drinking in their bars and sleeping in their orbit while he gathered material for the book that would make him famous. The club tolerated him for the better part of a year, and then, as the project ended, a group of angels stomped him badly enough that the beating became part of the book's legend. Thompson had gotten closer to the club than any outsider before him, and the lesson written into his exit is one the organization still enforces in quieter ways. The Hells Angels decide what the world learns about the Hells Angels, and no one else holds that right. The instinct is now written law. The club's bylaws forbid members from sharing information about any other member, and its own official website carries the policy in plain sight, stating flatly that it does not answer questions about members. The wall applies to everyone who comes asking. A reporter chasing a story receives the same silence as a curious neighbor, because the rule makes no distinction between a threat and an inconvenience. Information about an angel belongs to the angels, and a member who hands it out is giving away something that was never his to give. The discipline even extends to the internet, where the club's official site warns that no one is permitted to link to its pages without written permission from the corporation. It reads almost like a joke, an outlaw club enforcing web etiquette. But it is the same rule wearing modern clothes. Every channel through which information might move has a gate on it, and the club holds every key. And if silence governs what a member says, the next rule governs what he puts into his own body. Rule 8. No needles, ever. Of everything the public assumes about the Hells Angels, the drug question seems the least worth asking, because the club's entire mythology is soaked in narcotics, and its criminal history was built substantially on selling them, which is why the answer the Toronto Star received when it examined the club's actual rules surprised so many readers. The use of needles for pleasure is strictly forbidden, confirmed by the club itself, and a member who injects drugs recreationally is violating one of the organization's hard lines. The most notorious drug trafficking organization in motorcycle history has a substance policy, and it enforces that policy on its own members while moving product to everyone else. The rule makes perfect sense the moment you stop thinking about morality and start thinking about risk. A needle addict is the single most dangerous kind of man an organization can carry, because his loyalty has a competitor. He is a member whose need can be leveraged by police, and whose habit makes him exactly the sort of witness prosecutors dream of flipping. And when discipline around drugs breaks down inside the club, the Hells Angels have shown exactly how far they will go to restore it. In Lennoxville, The organization confronted a chapter that had crossed every line the rules exist to hold. 5 members of that chapter were executed by their own club, their bodies wrapped in sleeping bags and dropped into the St. Lawrence River, in a purge that remains one of the most infamous events in Canadian criminal history. The massacre was about money and disrespect as much as drugs, and one detail made the story stranger still, because the chapter's most feared killer survived it only by accident. That is the calculation running underneath the entire code. Every rule so far governs what a member owes the club and what the club can take from him when he fails to pay. Rule 9. In the meeting room, you stay silent until you are called on. Inside the clubhouse on meeting night, the loudest men in any town they roll through become something almost unrecognizable. They become quiet. The club's bylaws impose rules of order that would look familiar in a corporate boardroom, because a member is expected to hold his tongue unless he is spoken to, and the room runs on a written agenda that members are required to respect. Business moves in sequence under the chair's direction, and a member who talks over the proceedings or drags the room off course is not merely frowned at. He is fined, and the penalty for violating the meeting rules starts at $100. The fine is only the first tier, because a member who keeps breaking the room's rules is demonstrating something larger than bad manners, and a pattern of violations puts his standing itself on the table, a threat every man in the room understands without it being said. The scene is stranger than almost anything else in this list. A room full of men the government classifies as an outlaw threat, men who settle disputes outside those walls with fists and worse, sitting in enforced silence while an agenda item is read out and waiting for permission to speak. A charter meeting is where the club conducts the business that keeps it alive, votes on membership and on matters that can put men in prison, and a room where everyone talks is a room where nothing holds. The Hells Angels learned what every durable organization eventually learns, that discipline in small things is the training ground for discipline in large ones. The structure holding that room together looks nothing like anarchy either. Each charter operates with elected officers, a president and vice president at the top, alongside a secretary handling records and a treasurer collecting what members owe. And the office that matters most on meeting night is the sergeant-at-arms, the man responsible for order and for making sure the club's rules do not get broken in the club's own house. Authority inside the room is real and enforceable, and a member who resents taking direction has joined the wrong organization because the patch has never promised freedom from hierarchy. It promises a better hierarchy than the straight world offers, one a man has chosen and sworn into. Rule 10. You pay to join, you pay every month, and you pay when you fail. Strip away the leather and the mythology, and a Hells Angels charter runs on the same fuel as every organization in history. Money comes in and money is owed, and a member's relationship with the club is a financial obligation that never goes dormant. The entry price has been in writing since the 60s, when the initiation fee stood at $15, roughly $150 in modern terms, and initiation is only the first line on a ledger that follows a member for the rest of his life. After the entry fee come the dues, collected on schedule by the charter treasurer, and after the dues come the fines, the club's private tax system for every failure this list has described. A missed meeting carries a price tag, and so does a motorcycle that sits dead past 30 days, which means a careless member is not merely embarrassing himself. He is funding the organization that disciplines him, one violation at a time. The genius of the system is how it converts misbehavior into revenue while making punishment feel bureaucratic rather than personal, because a man who pays a fine has settled his account, and the club can move forward without a grudge sitting in the room. Where the money goes reveals what the club actually values. Charter funds maintain the clubhouse and finance the runs, and beneath those expenses sits the deeper obligation, the pooling of resources when the organization or its men collide with the law. A club that expects prosecution as a routine cost of existence budgets for it the way a business budgets for insurance. And every member's monthly payment is part of that armor. When an angel sits in a courtroom, he does not sit there alone. And the money that surrounds him with lawyers comes from the same brothers who fine him when his motorcycle will not start. And the system does not stop at full members, because every charter sits at the center of a network of support clubs, smaller organizations wearing their own patches and running their own meetings on the same model, and their obligations flow upward toward the angels above them. So membership is never something a man simply holds. It is something he pays to keep month after month in a system where even his failures have a price printed next to them. The club can reach into his wallet whenever the code demands it, and most members consider that a bargain, because what the club asks for next goes far beyond money. The remaining rules claim the hours of his life, and eventually, his blood. Rule 11. When the club rides, you ride. And when a brother dies, you show up twice a year. On dates the organization sets, the Hells Angels move like a single body. Members ride roughly 12,000 miles together annually, and buried inside that number is the obligation that defines it, because the great runs are not invitations. They are requirements, mass movements of the entire membership to destinations chosen by the club, gatherings that can pull charters across state lines and national borders, and a member's presence on that road is treated as part of what he owes. The run is where the organization becomes visible to itself. Hundreds of identical patches moving in formation, and a man who finds reasons to miss it is making a statement whether he intends to or not. Absence reads as distance, and distance, in a club built on total commitment, reads as a problem. But when a Hells Angel dies, the funeral becomes a command performance for the living, and the club turns mourning into the largest show of force it ever stages. The world saw what it looks like in the summer of 2022, when Sonny Barger, the architect, died at the age of 83, and thousands of riders converged on a California speedway to send him off. A procession so large that police monitored it like a public event. Every major club funeral follows the same logic on a smaller scale, with charters traveling across states and sometimes across oceans to put their patches in the ground beside a fallen member. The message aims in two directions at once. To the family, it says the club buries its own. To every rival and every watching agency, it says the organization can summon an army on a week's notice, and all it takes is a death. Underneath the spectacle, the funeral obligation enforces the same principle as the weekly meeting. The club is demonstrating to its own members most of all that belonging does not pause. Rule 12. The rules are enforced, with fists if necessary. Every rule in this list, from the 30-day motorcycle clock to the silence in the meeting room, would amount to nothing more than words in a drawer without the final rule holding them all up. Violations have consequences, and the consequences do not stop at fines. The club enforces its code physically when it judges that money is not enough, and the proof is not a rumor or an ex-member's war story. It is a federal case file. Returned to that clubhouse in Vallejo, California, because the case that came out of it comes with named defendants and a federal docket in the Eastern District of California. The two victims, identified in court documents only as Victim 1 and Victim 2, were members of a puppet club, a subordinate organization that rides under the authority of the Hells Angels Vallejo Charter. And in October of 2021, they were brought to that charter's clubhouse over perceived infractions of the Hells Angels rules. Court records lay out the scene inside. The first victim felt uneasy when he arrived, and full patch members had to talk him through the door. And once he was seated in a chair near the bar, the president of the Vallejo Charter asked whether he had not been good to him. And then the beating began. It left him with multiple fractured ribs and bruising across his face and lungs. Injuries he later reported to the Vallejo Police Department. The second victim, a smaller man, was knocked unconscious 3 separate times. And when the beatings ended on October 13th, the charter president told the first victim he would be killed if he ever showed his face in Vallejo again. While Michael Mahoney, a 30-year-old full-patch member of the Vallejo Hells Angels living in Fairfield, added that if he retaliated, the club knew where he lived. What followed is all on the federal record. On December 8, 2021, officers executed search warrants tied to the beating, and at Mahoney's Fairfield home, They found a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver with its serial number scratched off and a Sears & Roebuck 12-gauge shotgun sawed down to roughly 12 3/4 inches, while a warrant served the same day at the Vacaville home of Kenneth Caspers Jr., another patched member of the Hells Angels, turned up firearms and 18 rounds of ammunition in his master bedroom and bathroom, contraband for a man carrying a prior felon in possession conviction. A federal grand jury indicted Jaime Alvarez and Dennis Killo Jr., both members of the Hells Angels, on May 27, 2022, and Mahoney became the third Hells Angel indicted that year. Caspers, whom court filings describe walking through the aftermath of the beating and mopping up a victim's blood, became the fourth in January of 2023. Mahoney pleaded guilty to possessing a firearm with an obliterated serial number and an unregistered short-barreled shotgun. And in May of 2023, the United States Attorney's Office announced his sentence, just over 3 years in federal prison. The investigation behind those charges pulled in the FBI and the ATF alongside the sheriff and police departments across Solano County, all of it because a motorcycle club enforced its rule book with fists. And the most revealing detail in the file belongs to the second victim, because when a Vallejo police officer reached him, he refused to give a truthful account of the attack, out of fear of further harm from full-patch members and associates of the Vallejo Hells Angels. The silence rule from earlier in this list was working perfectly on a man who was not even a Hells Angel. That is what makes the case remarkable. Investigators had claimed for decades that the Hells Angels discipline their world with violence, and here it finally sits in a federal prosecution with the word rules attached. Not folklore passed between ex-members, but a documented case with 4 patched Hells Angels as named defendants. That collision is the honest ending to this list, because it answers the question sitting underneath all 12 rules. Why would grown men, in an organization the world calls lawless, submit to a code stricter than anything their straight lives ever demanded? The answer is that the code was never a burden the club imposed on the brotherhood. The code is the brotherhood, the thing that separates a patched member from every pretender on a motorcycle. And the men inside understand that it stays real only as long as breaking it costs something. The Hells Angels have spent nearly 80 years making sure it always costs something. 12 rules, and not one of them optional. Together they turn the image of the lawless biker inside out, because the Hells Angels are not free men who answer to no one. They answer to an organization that demands more discipline and obedience than almost any job on earth, and enforces every line of it with violence. The patch is not a symbol of freedom. It is a contract written in fines, silence, and blood. And when a member breaks that code badly enough, the club sometimes settles the matter permanently. To see how far the Hells Angels will go to enforce their own rules, watch what happened the night they turned on 5 of their own and murdered every one of them. Click the next video for the Lennoxville Massacre.